Need some resources and ARK the center? Of course you do. Well, we've compiled every single resource you're going to need into one location guide right here with timestamps along the way. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and let's get into it. Metal, of course, the one go-to source. You're going to be wanting to know where on earth you get that precious resource to smelt into ingots. Well, to be honest, it's pretty much everywhere on the map, though perhaps the most populated areas are places like the South Snowy Mountains. Directly underneath the floating island, you can find some good chunks down there. Or even on the floating island, where you'll find some Ankies around there too, handy to use to farm your metal. The volcano is absolutely brimming with plenty of metal in some good chunky areas like this pillar here. And certainly around the lava pools of the volcano, you'll find a good wealth there too. But if you're starting in the Bob Spawn tropical south, then you'll find a decent wealth up on ledges just circulating around Blue Ob. And the Redwoods is definitely a go-to source. Originally was the best place to get metal in ASE, now brimming with spots all over ASA, with this location here, and in the bucket load within the back of the Megalania cave right at the top of the map. Heading further west, you'll find even more chunks of nodes along cliff sides quite high up, with a good selection of them heading into a crack sort of cave den area around the western side too. Heading onto the jungle zones now, Jungle South has got some good chunky areas around these locations here, with some more just adjacent on other pillars in this location too. Pushing onto the eastern side of Jungle South, you'll also find some more metal nodes around here, as well as plenty of crystal about on top, and a good decent amount in this spot within mid-jungle. With some more further round, heading towards the underworld entrance, and a nice selection of nodes up in Jungle North, with some more over on the opposite side of Jungle North too. But of course, if you really want to, if you head deep within the sea, you will find an absolute wealth of metal nodes down there. Going to be a bit of a challenge for you to farm, but a Dunkleo could be a good way to farm them. Onto Obsidian now, a pretty rare resource within ASE, though a bit more widespread on ASA. If you don't know, Skull Island is the place to go, and still is within ARK Survival Ascended. A wealth of obsidian all littered around the top of it and around the mouth of the island. And the volcano has a lot more chunky resources around than it ever did before. This pillar in particular absolutely brimming with it. But you can find a small selection of them around North Snow on top as well, with a fair amount right at the bottom underneath the floating island. But don't forget the sea. Deep in the sea, you can find plenty of nodes there too. Not sure if the Dunkleo farms these ones, but might be the one to go to for these two. Onto Crystal now, and this one again brimming absolutely everywhere. Before it used to be in smaller chunks, but you can find these in so many locations, such as the floating island. There's a small selection over at Tropical South, and a decent amount across the Redwoods with this spot here in the west, and a good chunky amount again in the Megalania cave on the east. Wrapping round further to the east, you'll find even more nodes, and as per the previous resources, again in the bucket load under the sea. And as before, and as with the other resources, loads all over Volcano Island. Literally millions of the stuff found across multiple pillars across this region. But you know, if you want to stick to more bobbier areas, Jungle North does have a fair amount within this location. And if you can reach it, might need a flyer for this one, you can find a small amount here at Jungle Mid, with some decent amounts not too difficult to reach within Jungle South. Heading even further south, across adjacent from Skull Island, you can find some chunks here on these on these pillars. Onto oil now, and as you'd expect, is in the bucket load within the sea. Deep in the sea is where you want to go, and easily found with these weird oil trails floating up to the surface, with many spots, perhaps far too many to cover within this guide, but these are perhaps the most prominent locations. But you can find an overwhelming amount of chunky nodes in the shallow sea area underneath the floating island, with a literal handful of nodes at South Snow, though admittedly very hard to find. But don't forget, there is actually 1 or 2 nodes much more reachable within the rivers of the jungle. But again, if you want oil in the bucket load, get a dunk and go deep in the sea. You won't regret it, with even more locations spread around in places like this, and even more as you head around to the eastern side of the volcano. And if you plan to live within the underworld, you can find a good chunky amount of nodes all throughout the lake area within the main underworld. Pushing on to Silica Pearls now, so much more harder to find in ASA, but they can be found, and especially found in the rivers of the jungle, perhaps your first go-to areas if you need pearls. But the aptly named Pearl Cave, as you can expect, has absolutely bucket loads of the stuff if you can get through there and kill all the dirty minions in there. But don't forget, of course, the sea is the best place to go. Get yourself an anglerfish and you'll find plenty deep in the dark blue, with a good chunky amount found also again directly underneath the floating island. But again, you know, deep sea is the way. Get yourself that anglerfish and you'll be farming plenty in no time, with spots, locations such as this one here, with many across the eastern regions and the south and the north. But don't forget, if you're planning to build down by the ice palace, there is a few chunky amounts right close to it down in a river pool just south of the palace. And a surprising new addition to the centre, perhaps compensating for the lack of burnt trees, is salt in the form of bones. These particular bones right here, you need to go and farm these if you want plenty of salt in your life, though not sure what you're going to do with this unless you plan to make any of the items from scorched earth. But hey, need some salt, get yourself a big bone. That's what she said. Beaver dams, need some paste in your life? Of course you do. Beaver dams is still the way and the best way to farm them on the center, with a good chunky amount of locations spread all across these specific points. But don't forget, of course, can guarantee you some early silica pearls as well as mushrooms and flowers. But if you want to simply have something that guarantees you paste automatically generated over time, tame yourself an Achatina in these spots here, and don't forget you can farm these for chitin too. Need some early game defenses? Well, Plant X is your way, with you able to farm some X seeds from these plants throughout the swamp. And if you need some sap in your life, the redwood trees, they're all throughout the redwoods because it's called the redwoods. Make yourself a sap tap and plug it in, wait a bit of time, and there's your sap sorted. Honey can be gotten and farmed. Using a dire bear is a good way to farm them if you don't plan to break them to tame yourself a bee, though they are pretty high up on the trees, so be mindful if you plan to farm some honey. Need some black pearls in your life? Well, Tuzos are the best way to farm them, and you can find these deep within the sea, offering bucket loads of black pearls as well as absorbent substrate and a bit of oil to boot. Need some easy poly and don't want to craft any hard poly? Well, organic poly is the way, gonna be farmed through killing penguins, Kairuku, and feels like there's more spawns on ASA than there were in ASE in these particular spots here. Don't forget as well, the Ice Palace is a go-to spot to find these too. And if you want the end game knockout stuff, Biotoxin, you're going to find these by farming Nidaria / jellyfish, and you'll find these all throughout the sea here. Plan to tame some carnivores without having any kibble to hand? Well, mutton is the way, and mutton can be farmed by killing these things, sheep, overseas, or you could tame them to guarantee yourself an infinite supply of mutton as well as wool. And if you really want to attract dinos to other dinos, then Ammonite Bile is your way, and you're going to farm that by finding ammonite deep within the sea. You can sometimes get the odd black pearl or two from these too. And if you want your lighting to light up to look a bluish hue, or plan to make an electric prod, angler gel's the way by killing anglers, all found throughout the sea. And don't forget, if you've got swamp disease or need to get some fishing rod bait, then leeches are the way. Found all throughout the swamp, offering a bunch of chitin on top too. With many other creatures offering chitin on top, including the Uranio, scorpions, and as expected within particular caves, as well as Arthros. But early game, you might find you want to farm some Meganora or some dirty little buggy ants. And that's your lot. That's all the resources you're going to need. Hopefully, things like hide, wood, thatch. You shouldn't really need a guide for that, right? So yeah, until the next one, my name's Raasclark. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, peace out.